Dear friends, I can't begin to tell you how incredibly moving it is to be here with all of you. To see Iranians and Jews, two ancient people, united by an age-old bond, standing shoulder to shoulder in solidarity with Israel. It's just beautiful. Over 2,500 years ago, Cyrus the Great freed the Jewish people from Babylonian captivity. And I'm telling you, the day when the great Iranian people will be freed from their captivity is fast approaching. 44 years ago, the Iranian people, with their magnificent history and civilization, have been taken hostage by the regime in Tehran. For nearly half a century, the Islamic Republic has brutalized, tortured, raped, and killed countless Iranians. It has plundered the Iranian people's wealth to finance its death squads throughout the region, to export their hate, destruction, and misery to the entire Middle East and beyond. The regime's main proxy, Hezbollah, have brought Lebanon to the brink of collapse and are about to destroy the country in another disastrous war. The regime has helped Assad butcher hundreds of thousands of Syrians and drive out millions from their homes. And it brought death and destruction to Iraq, Yemen, and now to Israel and Gaza. These Hamas Einsatzgruppen who committed unspeakable crimes against humanity were funded, armed, and as we now learn, trained by the regime. Like their masters in Tehran, Hamas is a genocidal, totalitarian death cult. And against such an existential threat, Israel's natural right to self-defense can only mean, as the European Parliament itself demanded last week, and I quote, the elimination of Hamas. The 500 members of the European Parliament who supported this resolution know that unless Hamas is defeated, there can be no peace and no hope for the Israelis or the Palestinians. Hamas will be the first of the regime's proxies to fall, and I guarantee you it won't be the last. Right now, these modern-day Nazis in Tehran, Qatar, and Gaza are celebrating their victory against Jewish babies and Holocaust survivors. But just like the original Nazis, they have started a war that will end with their utter defeat. Sadly, also just like the original Nazis, these modern-day Nazis have their sympathizers here in our democratic societies, particularly our universities, which are supposed to educate the next generation of democratic leaders, produce and tolerate young people whose minds and most importantly souls have been so poisoned that they celebrate and justify these massacres. And so they scream from the river to the sea. We always knew what it meant. But now there is no more plausible deniability. Now it's crystal clear that this is no innocent call for a two-state solution, but a call to genocide. And these and similar chants must therefore be banned for what they are: hate speech and incitement, which is exactly what the Austrian and German authorities are now doing. And university presidents and high school directors and policymakers must clean their houses and ensure that their institutions teach truth and facts and basic moral values and not fanatical narratives that incite to hatred. EU leaders meeting here today have so far shown great moral clarity and resolve by standing with the people of Israel. And I want to particularly thank Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Parliament President Roberta Metsola for coming so quickly to Israel to bear witness of the crimes that are already now at real time being denied. I understand that there is a letter supposedly signed by 800 commission staff. I say supposedly because these brave officials didn't dare to sign their outrageous accusations against the president and the state of Israel, nor has the letter been fully published. Now I am an EU citizen. My and your taxes are paying the salaries of these civil servants. And as their name suggests, their job is to be a servant and not to try to undermine policymakers through leaked letters. But dear anonymous letter writers, if you are so outraged that the EU is taking side with the Jewish state against the Islamo-Nazis who burn babies and rape girls until their bones break, if that so outrages you, please be true to your questionable convictions and simply resign. There are plenty of talented Europeans with a functional moral compass who are happy to replace you. One word also to United Nations Secretary General Guterres. He was correct that this massacre didn't take place in a vacuum. Only he failed to provide the proper context, namely the endless incitement and dehumanization of Jews in parts of Palestinian society, including in UN-run schools. And anyone citing Palestinian grievances must acknowledge that this anti-Semitic hate, this rejection of any compromise, and the terror and violence it fuels, that what has prevented a two-state solution. And that has led Palestinians to repeatedly reject Israeli offers for statehood. One last word to the EU leaders meeting here today who support Israel's just fight against Hamas. Hamas is not alone. It is actually only the smallest part of an anti-Western axis composed of Hezbollah, the regime in Iran, and Russia. For too long, too many Europeans had illusions about Russia, illusions for which we now all, and primarily the Ukrainians, are paying a heavy price. The EU must now finally stop its illusions about Russia's closest military ally and sponsor of Hamas. The EU must play its part in pushing back against the regime in Iran. Among the first steps it ought to take is to finally put an end to the artificial distinctions between the supposedly military and political arm of Hezbollah, a distinction Hezbollah itself rejects. It's one organization and it belongs in its entirety on the EU terror list. The same applies to the head of this international terror network, the IRGC. The EU knows that they are not only a threat to the peoples of the Middle East. German and British intelligence have said publicly that they are plotting terror attacks against Jews and Iranians here in Europe. Despite claims to the contrary, there is plenty of evidence to designate the IRGC. What is lacking isn't the legal basis, but the political will to do so. Europe must now finally master that will. I thank you all for being here today. Let's do this together for the many fallen heroes in Iran, the brave women, the Democrats, the homosexuals, the minorities, all the victims of the regime. Let's do this together for the fallen heroes in Israel of October 7. But let's do this also for our many Arab brothers and sisters who have fallen victim to the regime and its proxies in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, and now also in Gaza. Thank you.